Well, I mean, I think a good example is somebody I coached who, for example, came from the same background that I did. So my original background was in journalism, and this person also came from journalism. And like me, they became an entrepreneur, or they started up their own consultancy. And what I realized of myself was also true of them, that I thought as a journalist, I was a good listener. And then I realized that as a journalist, actually, I was not a good listener, because I had listened for the headline, for the soundbite, for whatever it took to complete the story, and get the story out in that vessel or vehicle, whether that's the web page, the magazine, the newspaper, whatever. This person I was coaching, who, despite being a journalist, was fairly introverted, was also not a very good listener. So I was able to spot that pattern in them, and just got them to, you hear the phrase, 2 ears, 1 mouth, that they actually listen twice as much. I got them to listen twice as much. So I actually got them to communicate by communicating less, if you like, by actually stopping, biting their tongue, metaphorically rather than literally, and but just from the point of view of just waiting, asking open-ended questions in a way that brought out more from the people that they were talking to. So I helped coach in the communication in that sense.
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl Ponto. Each week I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week I'm excited to connect with Trevor Merriden. He is the founder and MD of Melbourne. A skilled and qualified executive coach, he specializes in transformative leadership coaching for powerful and effective communication. Alongside coaching, Trevor launched Melbourne as a content strategy and thought leadership consultancy. Its success has been based on his 3 decades of experience as a business journalist, author, and editor, and followed on from his first executive board role, in which he helped to treble the turnover of a strategic communications consultancy from £1 million to £3 million over a 3-year period. With Melbourne, Trevor has experienced at first hand the excitement and challenges of starting and scaling a business from scratch. This led him to become an accomplished broadcaster and speaker, devoted to helping startup and scale-up entrepreneurs find and build their confidence, and most notably through his popular Americast podcast series of interviews and inspirational business leaders. A particular strength, given his background, lies in Trevor's ability to coach senior executives to connect and communicate as effectively as possible with all stakeholders in an organization. Pragmatic, positive, and friendly, Trevor gives leaders and businesses the confidence they need to find new clarity, move forward, and realize their full potential. Congrats on helping entrepreneurs find and build their confidence, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be on the show, Karl.
Awesome. So why do you think it is that so many entrepreneurs struggle with confidence? It seems like such a key factor in building relationships, and it's surprising that people that are going out and building a new company would struggle so much with confidence.
Well, I think there's 2 parts to that answer, Karl. One is the perception of what an entrepreneur is in the first place, and then secondly, the challenges that they have to overcome. So if we deal with the first of those, the perception of an entrepreneur, a lot of people see an entrepreneur as some sort of swashbuckling, sort of extrovert figure, if you like, sort of hacking their way through the jungle, pushing back everything, bold, adventurous. And that is one style of entrepreneur. That's true. But what I've learned over the years is that there are many people who are skilled and successful at being entrepreneurs who might regard themselves as introverts, as perhaps process-driven rather than ideas-driven, that they have another set of skills. And the point that I would make in terms of one inhibitor to confidence is that a lot of people don't even start because they think they are not the quotes entrepreneurial type of person. Whereas I would say everybody has it in them to be an entrepreneurial person, whether they are introverts, extroverts, ideas people, process people. There are different ways to make money. The second thing is the challenges that come along is that there's no real manual for being an entrepreneur. And I would say that that's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing is that you learn, and the best entrepreneurs sort of learn as they go along. The bad thing is that for some people, the knockbacks that they get, whilst they're in business, the doors that are not so much closed or slammed in their faces, at certain moments, put them off. And I'd say there are many challenges that make people feel, I'm not sure I've got what it takes to do this. Okay, which I think are sometimes premature, and actually one of the reasons I set up my podcast, which you very kindly mentioned in the introduction, was that I wanted to share stories from entrepreneurs who had faced many such challenges and overcame them in some way on their way out. These are challenges of resilience. They're challenges of starting from a very bad place financially. They might be all sorts of challenges that they thought they might not overcome but did. So that's the two-pronged answer to your question.
Yeah, I think it's definitely important that I know one of the things about being an entrepreneur that I think can shake people's confidence is that, especially with the first time entrepreneur, there's so much you don't know about running a business and building a business. And so many entrepreneurs come in with, I just want to do this thing and I want to do it for myself, and I have an idea that's like, they're like, either like you said, have the tech or like the science or the business acumen for like a product idea. And I just want to do that part, but then there's like the other 90% of building a business that works that they either aren't super interested in or aren't able to do well or didn't really realize they need to know how to do. And when they get that realization, it can be very daunting because their skill set and they're like the 10% of the thing that's they like that gave them an idea to start a business, and not in everything else that's involved. And I think realizing that often that skill gap is a big challenge. I think then it also, what you mentioned about the kind of viewpoint of how people view entrepreneurs is gets in the way of them asking people for help or realizing they don't have to be like the solo, I do it all myself, I'm self-sufficient persona that gets presented in kind of the public consciousness. But it's, I think the ones that have succeeded all are ones that ask for help and they work with other people that can fill in those gaps in their knowledge and skill set.
And you're right. And that's one thing that leads to greater confidence is realizing that there are certain great skills that you have, certain things perhaps you're not so good at, and hiring people who are better than you. You will have, I'm sure you've sort of heard it many times. People say you hire somebody that's better than yourself, but that doesn't just mean that you're providing somebody with an income and helping mouths to be fed and so on. It also means you're helping yourself in terms of finding confidence, because then that liberates you from the things that you're perhaps not so good at in order to either appeal more to the strength or perhaps work on the development of the business. It's a liberation, rather than a cost burden if you hire the right person.
I think it's when it comes to building those connections, I think you mentioned earlier that a lot of people that start a business are more introverted because they do, especially like in the tech or science spaces, they're a subject matter expert on that niche of technology or science that they've studied, that they've been working in, often like in another company, and they spin it out. And so they're good at talking about the thing that, like, their product or their program or like whatever it is the company's supposed to be about, but they're not great at communication and connecting with people. And that low confidence, I guess, is a huge bottleneck, because if they're going to get funded, if they're going to find the right people, they need to be able to communicate and build these relationships?
Well, one thing I would say is that I've noticed, I've interviewed a lot of people, introverts and extroverts who have gone on to become successful entrepreneurs. And the interesting thing about the introverts is that they, if, for example, communication isn't really their thing, or not a strength at least, then a lot of people sell themselves or their business in communication through not talking about themselves and saying, "Look at me, aren't I brilliant?" They're actually talking about the issues that the person they're talking to must be facing. They ask questions and they draw information out of other people, and they're thoughtful. These are thoughtful, introverted entrepreneurs. They don't particularly like networking, they don't particularly like communicating, but they communicate through asking good questions. And so they shift the spotlight onto somebody else, and they sell in that way. And that's a good way that a lot of people I've spoken to have built their confidence.
So tell me more about that, because I know, like, based on your awesome intro and your experience, that you're often coaching people on how to be more confident. What's an example of someone you help with this process of building their confidence through asking questions?
Well, I mean, I think a good example is somebody I coached who, for example, came from the same background that I did. So my original background was in journalism. And this person also came from journalism, and like me, they became an entrepreneur, or they started up their own consultancy. And what I realized of myself was also true of them. That I thought as a journalist I was a good listener, and then I realized that as a journalist, actually, I was not a good listener, because I had listened for the headline, for the soundbite, for whatever it took to complete the story. And get the story out in that vessel or vehicle, whether that's the web page, the magazine, the newspaper, whatever. This person I was coaching, who, despite being a journalist, was fairly introverted, was also not a very good listener. So I was able to spot that pattern in them, and just got them to, you hear the phrase, 2 ears, 1 mouth, that they actually listen twice as much. I got them to listen twice as much. So I actually got them to communicate by communicating less, if you like, by actually stopping, biting their tongue, metaphorically rather than literally. And but just from the point of view of just waiting, asking open-ended questions in a way that brought out more from the people that they were talking to. So I helped coach in the communication in that sense.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant, because the standard way of getting people to connect with you is to be interested rather than interesting. And so that's more about asking, like you said, asking those open-ended questions and showing them that you're actually listening and not just waiting for the headline or the soundbite, so to speak. So
it was a difficult learning for me as well, because I remembered from my sort of fledgling entrepreneur days, I was used to asking the journalistic sort of "where are the bodies buried" type questions, and instead of that, just asking slightly more consultative questions where I was putting the person I was speaking to at the center.
Yeah, and I think it's something that it's a great skill for entrepreneurs, because it helps you build real connections beyond just a business relationship with the people that you need for the business to succeed. But it's also a great relationship building practice and skill set for family and friends and partners and stuff like that, because the reason why it works so well in business is because it's such an important way that humans connect in general, is to feel seen, heard, and understood by other people. And if you don't know how to listen, actively listen to people, then you're going to struggle to connect with them. And so whether this is like a friendship or a partner or a business colleague, if you're wanting to build a relationship there, being able to listen, like I said, with 2 ears and only 1 mouth is an important skill. So I think I like that you kind of had that. You got a little bit, you got some benefit from that coaching experience too, because you realize, oh, this is something that I used to do and might still be doing some. So you can, there's a bit of a reflection in your own experience there from helping that client. That's cool.
So I mean, sorry, go on.
Go ahead. So go ahead.
No, I was going to say that, I think that there are also kind of coaching interventions that I've made in, I suppose, two types of leaders, if you like. There's a leader who is maybe a leader who's been around the block, shall we say, who's been around for a while. And I think particularly in the last 4 or 5 years, beginning with the pandemic, but also continuing now in the age of AI, there has been a sort of massive change in leadership styles sort of going on. The command and control leader, pre-pandemic. I mean, suddenly that was a very difficult thing to do, if loads of people were working at home, and that was one dynamic. And then I think that there's leaders who are using AI, both in terms of developing it within their business, but also using it for themselves in terms of reaching leadership decisions. And they've got a challenge as well. It's not just about altering their style. It's also about using, data and the raw power of AI, perhaps to make better decisions, but to be more human than ever, I would say, in actually talking about those decisions, about how that fusion of AI and humanity goes on, which I'm sure is directly relevant to the type of interviews you've been conducting in this series. Then there's the fledgling leader, if you like, who is trying to put their first foot on the leadership rung, it's more of a confidence issue in that respect, in terms of speaking in their own authentic voice, not trying to imitate, what they think leadership means, but actually trying to, just be trying to lead in a style which fits, which they feel comfortable with, and having the confidence to do that. That's easier said than done, because they may have certain preconceptions, just as we were talking about preconceptions about what an entrepreneur is, but there are certain preconceptions about what leadership is. And so sometimes one of the challenges I have is with fledgling leaders is actually to say there isn't a manual, and whichever way works, but it's got to be true to you in the way you lead.
Yeah, I think there is, when it comes to leadership and communication, I do think there's more of it's still have a ways to go, in my opinion, but I think there's a good shift away from the 20th century version of hey, whatever the leadership at the top says goes, and very hierarchical and rigid, because so much stuff happens so quickly that if your business is waiting for approval from the higher ups to make decisions, and has to go all the way up this chain of command and back down, by the time it gets back down, the opportunity's lost or the situation's changed, and you're just woefully slow and lack the agility to adapt in time for the pace of business. And so I think there's finally a realization from a lot of companies that they need to reframe and restructure the way their businesses are run, and get rid of a lot of the middle managers and the verticality of the business structure, and get more into the more autonomous workers and more empowered workers that are able to take the vision of what the leadership is trying to do to get the company in the direction it needs to go, but not have to wait for approval for everything, because it just doesn't work anymore.
And you're right. And you made me think there of something else that's going on amongst leaders. Well, not just amongst leaders, actually. I think there are leaders who are using things like AI or the changing nature of leadership to up their game, change their style, in what they're doing. I do worry about something else, though, which is that the irony, I suppose, is that, if we take the example of AI is a triumph of human curiosity, and that we sort of built this thing that is just incredibly intelligent, sort of helps us in the work we're doing, our lives we're leading. But my worry is about whether it will tempt us to outsource part of our critical reasoning and problem solving, and whether that might be true around leaders as well. So I suppose my challenge, not just to leaders and to the wider audience or listening to this, is how they can use AI to become more and not less curious. That using AI as a chance to ask more questions. And I think that, to me, that's the key. Is that we started off we were talking about asking good questions, and I'm hoping that AI will give leaders and others to have the confidence to ask those extra questions, that AI gives them the benefit of doing, rather than just think AI said so and I accept it. Because I think if we say the latter, then we're in real trouble.
Yeah, I think the opportunity of AI is to automate a lot of the tasks that took up brain space from people, but now that it's freed up, use that brain space to ask more questions and build more connections and be more human. And the people that use it in that way, I think those businesses, those organizations, those leaders are going to be way more successful than the ones that use it as a crutch and try to replace human creativity and critical thinking with whatever the machine says goes, because that is an alluring trap, but one that's destined for failure and tragedy. But if the people are going to use AI as a tool to automate things, to free up brain space for people to be even more human, that's where I think the real opportunity is.
I think we have a choice about it as well. I think we have a choice about, it's not like the cartoon caricature of the March of the Machines sort of going on here. I mean, it's certainly, things are developing at a fast rate, but I think we have a choice as to around which way we go in this. And for as long as we have a choice in this, I think it's an essential thing. I'm very optimistic about the future, Karl, because I think the more we, sort of, whether we talk about leadership or elsewhere, that, the kind of the equilibrium or the changing equilibrium between sort of humans and AI goes on. I sort of sense that the more we use AI, the more the yearning for humanity and the human connection, I think, will grow. Just as you were saying that the leaders who do well will be those who don't become a slave to the AI, but will actually use it to ask more questions. In the same way, I just think that ultimately there is this reaction. We are all humans, and if we're humans, we feel things, and if we feel things, we know that if the balance is wrong, then we will try and correct that balance in some way. So I guess I'm optimistic, but then I'm an optimistic kind of person, I guess.
All right. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Trevor. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection Podcast, please leave a review, and share it. If you'd like to connect with myself or Trevor, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.